by here for those who were doing karaoke last night. It got a little warm, a little spicy in there. So sorry, but the air conditioner is fixed, so I think we are going to have a nice, cool day inside. I cannot speak for the Tennessee weather. But first of all, again, thank you for coming. Thank you for spending the morning with us to honor these wonderful guests who we have here, who have, again, are making LibertyCon such a wonderful weekend. So, for those of you who might not have been to a banquet here, just want to let you know, thank you in advance for having a little humor and a little patience. Nothing is too quick, but we're going to try to get you through as quickly as possible. These fine folks are going to do the work of speaking to you in a little while, so we are going to let them go ahead and go first after this. So the head table will go first. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to our wonderful master of ceremonies, Mike Massa.
So the trick is to use the microphone clearly, but like this. Great. I am Mike Massa, and I'm going to keep my remarks brief because you're here to hear from our astoundingly talented, gifted, and accomplished guests of honor. And I'm going to try to connect my remarks to our theme once again of exploring new worlds. I've pledged three things. I will be brief, I will keep it on topic, and I will keep it family friendly, which isn't always easy with SEALs behaving badly stories. It won't surprise anybody that has been in the military that usually practice that before you can go somewhere, you have to practice all the different missions for which you may be responsible in the event of whatever bad thing happening might be. And among the things the SEALs are known for, the first letter in SEAL stands for C. So that's sort of the origin of diving, specifically combat diving, with a really quiet, bubbleless underwater breathing apparatus. So not like Doc Cousteau, 0 bubbles. Is something you have to do, and you navigate underwater. And back in the old days, you didn't have those fancy propulsor, battery-powered jet devices on your legs. You just kicked, and you had to kick in a steady state because that was how you counted pace. If you do compass lines on a compass course with a map and a compass, and you count your steps, same thing. You count your kicks, and you watch your compass, and you navigate underwater. So I was riding, which is to say the passenger in a pair, and I was letting my first-time junior officer, you all know how well they navigate. And because, again, exploring new worlds, it's really easy to do a compass course on the same course the second time. Because you kind of know where you are. You have a sense for how the land lays. Even if it's dark, you know where you're going. Same thing holds true in a harbor. So for this test, we moved to a harbor we'd never used before in Oceanside, California. And the unique and special thing about this harbor, again, exploring new worlds, is that the commercial or civilian basin, full of yachts, is right next to, immediately adjacent to, about 300 yards from, the military basin where our make-believe target was. So we insert over the horizon, long, uncomfortable boat ride, we get in the water, we navigate for a while on the surface, and then we go under. And his name was John Katzmarek. His nickname was Katzbo, or Rambo, because he was really enthusiastic, really big, and not very bright. And I wanted to get a sense of how he'd do somewhere he'd never been before, because he could end up being in charge very easily in the event that I'm unavailable to do whatever I'm supposed to be doing. And so Katzbo is very confident, very athletic, and he thought I was an old guy. I was like 25, he's 21. And so we're kicking, and he comes up, and the way that works is you very slowly break the surface of part of your face mask, and you cover your face mask with your fingers to reduce the reflection and the glare, and then right back down again. And that's like the last chance you get to make sure you're in the right spot. He comes down, he gives me the thumbs up, he's confident, we go. And because you know the relative distances, you can count the kicks and know about when you should be hitting something like a pier, or a boat, or a ship, or the shore. And we're swimming, and we're swimming, and we're swimming, and his kicks get slower, and because he knows something's wrong, this isn't quite right. So he stops, and he goes up, and he comes down, and he looks at me, and his eyes are really wide. So he's trying to communicate, and this is the big part, and it may happen to our explorers in new worlds, If you're breathing on bubbleless UVA or underwater breathing apparatus, your lungs are part of a closed loop because you submerge after you purge your system of nitrogen. So your nose and your mouth have to remain part of this breathing loop. You can't take your mouthpiece out to talk, and you can't take your mask off. So there's a lot of grunt talk happening, and a lot of gestures, and a lot of those aren't family friendly, so I'll skip those. So I finally, I gotta figure out where we're at. I'm watching my clock, and there's only so much time, because you come in with the tide, you do your job, and you go out with the tide. Underwater, you can swim at a steady pace of 1 knot. That's 1/3 how fast an adult walks. So it's not quick, it's really slow. It's quiet, it's stealthy, not quick. And if the current kicks up, and the current's anything more than 1 knot, which it usually is, yeah, you're not going anywhere. It's not a good deal. So I come up and I look around, same kind of peak, and we're in the yacht basin. If you know anything about coastal California, if you can afford to put your boat at $100 per linear foot of slip space, you got money. I'm like, oh man, we can't swim back out and come all the way back in again. So my plan is we're gonna slip our fins off, keep all of our ribs on. We're in head-to-toe black neoprene with a big piece of equipment on our chest with all kinds of military equipment hung about us. And we're going to climb out of the water and sneak unobserved through a brilliant marina across some sculpted lawns and landscaping through the fence. This is my idea, right? I take responsibility. And into the military base. And the only way it was going to work is because they're watching for us from the sea. And they're so used to seeing all the people in the marina that just it's so what? And I figure we can do that and get in the water before anybody reports us. And we pulled it off. That's the great. No one thinks that, this is pre-9/11, but no one thinks, gosh, why are those men all in black with explosives and all these people sneaking through the boats? It's a movie or something, California. So we get to the little park that's right where the fence is, and it's a pool of deep shadow. And I'm like, this is perfect. We can get there, orient ourselves, get everything set for the last push, and slip into the water, and bing, bang, boom, we're on target. So we go sneaking in. How many people here have seen the original, what's it called? Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox? Remember when he crashes into the barn and he has that yellow suit on? And the people who see that don't think he's human? So as it turned out, that little dark glade in the parking lot with a bit of manicured grass was occupied by a pair of people who were otherwise engaged exploring their own new worlds. And so we pause and I trip because they're in shadow. And so and we're on a buddy line, my dive buddy and I. So all 4 of us are on the ground on a pile, writhing. And I can't talk because he can't take the mouthpiece out. So I'm trying to reassure them. There's this shrill screaming sound, which was the male Marine. And we disentangled and went our separate ways. Me with Casco to continue the job of exploring in my direction and get back in the water and the mission to continue, and hopefully they found a way to continue what they were doing. So we ended up, it all went well. The rest of the exercise was unremarkable, and no one was the wiser. And so we're back in the briefing room. Casco asked me, "Hey sir, aren't you gonna tell them what happened?" I'm like, "Are you crazy?" That's like rule number 1. You don't talk about that. So now it's been almost 35 years. I can safely disclose that I was the exoplanetary explorer in the parking lot of the Oceanside Civilian Marina. So if that was any of you, now you know. It is genuinely an honor, and it's kind of intimidating to introduce the people that are up here with me because their accomplishments aren't just things that I can talk about, they're things that I've appreciated. And the first person I'm going to introduce is Chuck Gannon, our literary guest of honor. And I was friends with Chuck and reading his current material before I realized that he'd been working for a long time in this field, that he was the Charles Gannon that worked with GDW, Games Development Workshop, on a little known game you may have heard of called Traveler, which was a very big deal in the 80s and the 90s, and actually a little bit earlier than that. So without further ado, Chuck, I'm going to turn this over to you.
I don't know what's wrong with this convention. Remember what happened the last time they gave me a microphone? He says you got to get right up on it. Yeah. following that story. At any rate, by the way, how's the fried chicken? Good. Yeah, I didn't have it because if I had, then you'd know why I need to probably wear a bib at all times. So, at any rate, I didn't know actually the theme of the con because I only saw it in one place much later on. But it turned out, I guess, that I was sort of caught in the vibe because I wrote something that I think you're going to see has to do with those new worlds and your absolutely central role to that process. Now, mostly, I'm not asked why I write, but why I write what I write. Now, I don't know why that's the most common question. I don't even have a theory about that. Yes, you can groan at that callback. The most frequent question I get from authors is, why not set the Kane Riordan series in the far future? That way you don't have to worry about connecting it to our history, and you can use any super text you want. My answer, because the complexities not only make a universe immersive, but durable. Here's why. Most near-future settings get overtaken by events within a decade. On the other hand, most far-future SF doesn't ever show how we got from today's world into that wondrous future. That's why I put the Kaneverse at that transitional pivot point. For those characters, our century is their immediate history. They still can't reach the stars. They believe that humanity is alone in the universe. Sound familiar? By the end of the first book, all that has changed, which means they have to as well. And that's what I want to write about. A common question from readers is, why not write something breezier, make more money? Well, they're right. And I've certainly written in that mode, but we write best what we like best. And sometimes there's a fine line between keeping stories accessible and slavishly chasing the market. And if your heart isn't in it, readers always detect that. Readers also ask, why do you write your novels like they're techno-thrillers, like you're trying to predict the future? I'll answer with the words of Charles Kettering. My interest is in the future because I'm going to spend the rest of my life there. But I'm not trying to predict the future. I don't think any hard essay author really is. Because when you get right down to it, science fiction predicts the future pretty much the way a shotgun kills a duck. But remember, a shotgun blast isn't. It'll be better. It gets better. I'm sorry. Science fiction predicts the future the way a shotgun kills a duck. So what? But remember, a shotgun blast isn't random. It's just less precise. And the more its, or science fiction's, pattern is constrained, the tighter and more focused its engagement of the target. Hard SF isn't trying to hit the bullseye of predicting what will happen, but its rigorously careful aim can create a reasonable projection of what might happen. Now, every once in a while, people do ask why I write. Frankly, I think writing chose me as much as I chose it, but why choose science fiction and fantasy? Because I want to know what's beyond the next hill, next planet, next physics-shattering breakthrough. And no starship, time machine, or magical portal could ever bring me to as many worlds as I have come to know by reading and especially creating them. In short, I write stories of alterity for the exact same reasons that you devour them. And here's something you might not know about us. We're the smallest demographic segment that network TV ever bothered to define. We are also the hardest to sell to. Put another way, we're outliers, not because we merely enjoy vicariously experiencing other worlds, but because we revel in it. Because we spend considerable money and time on books, media, conventions, to scratch the itch we all have, to imagine how things might be different, to see what's over the next hill. That's why I've put you, my fellow outliers, at the very core of my fiction. In every novel, the pivotal characters are those whose greatest inclination and strength is to explore and experience new places, new beings. They are those rare individuals who are able to cross the divide between themselves and other species, so much so they can become suspect among their own kind. Now, not all of my storytelling is so intentional in discovery. Sometimes it hits me with surprises too, such as this one. I always believed that the Beatitudes had it wrong, that hope was more important than love. As long as you have hope, you have agency. But in writing the final scene of humanity's encounter with its malign alter ego, I stumbled upon this insight, which if David Weber was able to not to have come today because he has a headache right now, he'd be grinning at me at this point. Cain remembered the Keturah commander's disdain for human families' focus upon love instead of pragmatism. Family is our strength, but it is your weakness. Riordan shook his head. And you, Keturah, have to believe that, because the price you pay for all your victories is love. But love, and the loyalty it breeds, is not just our best virtue. It is the weapon I will use to destroy you. And so I realized that love does come first, if it's the fierce love of things beyond ourselves. Family, friends, nation, species, because that's what fuels the mighty engine of hope and deeds. I guess I should have saved that for tomorrow's service. But like any reciprocating engine, since hope's power and agency is the product of a dynamic equilibrium, many of my characters find that counterintuitive, even frustrating. After all, our species, like most of my aliens, is an evolutionary success because we use high energy bursts of hunting to enable long stretches of inactivity. Or to put it another way, we worked as little as possible to be, well, as static as possible. Except human stability is never static, even if it looks that way. It's always the product of a dynamic equilibrium. It's there in the homeostasis of our body, the sinusoidal beating of our heart, even the ebbs and flows of scarcity and plenty, war and peace. Past, present, future, we humans get frustrated, though, if events zig when we zag. But in that frustration, there is also promise. Because we never achieve perfection, we always have something to strive for. Because we never achieve permanent solutions, our impulse to find better ones constantly sharpens our wits. Now, plenty of my characters, both human and alike, take the lazy, anti-cognitive shortcuts that evolution baked into our genes, of assuming that correlation does indicate causality, or that the map really is the terrain, underwater or otherwise. Or, as we see in our polarized media, responsibility somehow becomes the same as culpability. Yeah, that's a greased chute into a cesspool of hasty blame and retribution. Is there any way to disrupt those cycles of easy answers that really aren't? Well, I have a theory about that. But I don't need to share it here because the answer is already idling under the hood of the Caneverse. Most of the characters you'll encounter there are products of a system where voluntary national service expanded beyond the armed forces. A system where almost everyone earns lifelong benefits by spending 2 hard years in the service of others. But with this proviso, they must do so in a place entirely unlike the one in which they grew up. Because that way, the greatest beneficiary of the system isn't the individuals, it's the nation. A nation of people who walk in each other's shoes. That new world. Who've seen how the other half lives, hopes, and dies. And so have seen, and usually remember, that no difference is greater than our shared humanity. Now this is just, if that sounds like I'm winding up for the final pitch, you're right. It's just one more view of our world, of a world other than our own, which, to come full circle, is what brings you here. Narratives of alterity that show us not only how things can be different, but that, inevitably, they will be different. Striving for a better world is not an easy or straightforward project. But as long as we love, hope, and work to believe in the goodwill of our fellows, our social contracts can prevail. For me, that theme is so important that I made it explicit at the end of my first book, Fire with Fire, where Cain and the Dornani liaison uncle have this exchange. Cain frowned. So the Dornani do not lack power, they lack the commitment for decisive action. He looked up. Except you, Almond. I cannot comment. However, many of us have noticed the similarity between the oath of service that a custodian must take and a human axiom attributed to an Irish philosopher. And what's that axiom? All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. Or, in other words, love, hope, and act. Thank you.
Sorry, when you're a foot shorter than everybody else. So science fiction might not dictate the future, but it absolutely shapes it. And we cannot do that without our wonderful storytellers. So we just wanted to, you have a few of these, I believe, but we used Chaz's wonderful artwork and wanted to give you a gift to remember us this year.
Wow, that was really powerful. Thank you for that, Sean. And that poor Doug. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce my brand new friend and our artist guest of honor, Chaz Kemp. Because I'd never met him before, I was struggling to find the right words to describe him. And I had, a poor paragraph together, but then I looked into our pamphlet and I was reading what Carolyn Kay wrote, and oh my God, is that terrific. If you haven't read how she describes him, you gotta pick it up and read it. But I'm just gonna do one little bit, and I can't possibly top your prose. It's so good. And which one am I gonna pick? I'm gonna do two. The first one is obviously artist guest of honor. She explains that he's part Fae, he travels the world, and over the years he's met all these interesting people. We might recognize one or two. Here's one. Cleopatra was very fond of Chaz. However, what she said cannot be repeated in polite company. Suffice to say, they had a grand time during their experimental phase in college, 49 AD, or 49 BC. And then my favorite, which is more artistically related, is Van Gogh credits Chaz with helping him bring Starry Night into being, saying, if he hadn't convinced me to go out drinking that long, I would never have seen that beautiful sky in 1989. Yeah, come on up here.
I think all of that was to say I'm probably pretty old. So I realize now that I should have written down a lot of really cool things, and I didn't. So I will just talk until I'm tired of hearing my own voice. So first off, I just want to say thank you guys so very, very much for having me out as your artist guest of honor. I am thrilled beyond measure. I had heard about LibertyCon for years, about how cool everyone was. And of course, I was sitting there going, oh yeah, we hear that from everybody. But it turned out to be true, which is kind of cool. So don't look so surprised. Sometimes people tell things. So it was, it's my absolute pleasure, and my wife and I are just having a really amazing and awesome time. You guys run a very, very cool con, and this is our best time. We just wish that we lived closer. So for the record, thank you guys very, very much. So I appreciate it. Now, not taking anything away from what I just said, but our gift basket did have a whole bottle of wine, so. All right, so my theme, the thing I kind of want to impart to everyone, is to let you know that I know you hear a lot of stories around from authors and artists and things who, generally say, yes, I've been writing my whole life, or I've been drawing my whole life, and that kind of thing. I didn't become a professional illustrator until I was about 35 years old. So I had a really, really late start. I was an actor for a long time. I actually even won an Emmy Award. I was a musician. Thanks. It was a regional Emmy. It's not really. I say it to impress people. I feel like I gotta say something. But yeah, I was a musician for a very, very long time. And I had a band that toured around the country. We had 7 albums. It was really cool. But none of those things really stuck with me. It was one of those things where it's like, if I could give it up, if I had to give up acting, if I had to give up, theater, if I had to give up music, could I do it? And my answer was always, well, yeah, if something cool, better comes along, I could probably give it up. Which proved that those things were not the thing I really needed to do with my life. And I had been searching from the time I was 17 to the time I was about 35 for that one thing that I could do as a career. And I really struggled. And it was really, really, really difficult. And I was pressed a lot. It was hard. And I know that there are people, maybe even here in this room, that have also experienced something similar. And you don't really hear about it because here in America, we hear nothing but the success stories. We hear nothing about the struggle that people have to go through. Nobody wanted to see, J.K. Rowling in her first 3 or 4 years when she was first writing Harry Potter, because people aren't interested in the struggle. They want to see the victory at the end. They want to see, when everybody gets the prize. But the thing is that the struggle happens to everybody. You just don't hear about it. And so, because people don't talk about it, I thought it was really, really a good idea to let you guys know that everything that you want to do with your life, everything that's worth it, takes a lot of hard work. And that hard work that's that period of time that nobody's looking at. Nobody's inviting you to be artist or author guest of honor. Nobody's sitting there giving you praise or anything like that because you're struggling and you're working really, really hard. And you try this and it doesn't work, and you try that and it doesn't work. And you fall and you stumble and you get back up. And you keep getting up and you keep getting up. And if it's something that you really love, though, you know that you love it because you keep getting back up. When your mom comes to you and says, the post office is hiring. And I couldn't get upset with that because, one, yeah, it's true. And two, because she was just looking out for me because she really cared, because I was struggling. But working at the post office or doing anything that wasn't my freelance illustration felt like death to me. And that's when I knew this is the thing that I want to do for the rest of my life. I don't care if I starve to death. I don't care how hard it is. I don't care if I have to struggle. Whatever it is I have to do, it's gonna be worth it. And so throughout that whole process, I had to believe in myself because hardly anybody else did. Girlfriends left me. Some of my best friends in the world stopped talking to me because they're like, you're stupid. Why are you doing this? You're struggling. You just get a regular job. And again, this is the stuff, I don't want to depress anybody, but this is the stuff that people don't talk about. They don't talk about all the sacrifices that you have to make in order to achieve that dream that you have. And for me, because I finally found that one thing, I went to Art Institute, I got nothing but straight A's. And I knew, it's like, oh my God, this is the best I've ever done in school. Holy crap, this must be what I want to do, And so through all of that, it took the first 5 years or so, it was a struggle, it was hard. I had to really hustle to get clients. But once everything really started to kick in, it became worth it. And I kept working and I kept trying to improve my art, and I kept working, and I kept working, and I kept working. So by the time I was about 43, 44, that's when everything really started to hit. Where now all of a sudden people were like, oh my God, where did he come from? Holy crap, his art is really cool. It's like, yes, I am an overnight sensation, 10 years in the making. And so since then, I've continued to work hard, I've continued to hustle, I've continued to constantly try to improve my art. And I think my entire point with all of this is that it is not too late. John Lennon, when he was about 5 years old, supposedly, I wasn't there. I guess I was dating Cleopatra at the time. But John Lennon famously said when he was about 5 years old, his teacher asked the class, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be happy. And I realized that was probably my number one goal. It's probably what everyone's number one goal should be, is to be happy. To have a life that you love, to have a career that you love, to have people around you that love you and that you love and that support you. And it's, it's not a given. But if you can achieve those things, if you can be happy, it's always going to be worth it, and it's never, ever, ever too late. So if I can impart any kind of wisdom, in quotation marks, at all, that would be what I would want to share with everyone, because it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's not an overnight thing. It's a lot of work, but it's good work, and it's absolutely 100% worth it. So thank you guys very much.
So Chaz might be new to LibertyCon, but he could have been here every year with the spirit he has. And you fit in so seamlessly. It's amazing. Not only the beautiful artwork, but you two are just beautiful human beings. So part of the exploring the world, you cannot do that without the vision that our artists create. So thank you.
Our next guest of honor is our STEM guest of honor, and it was challenging for me to refrain from fanboying all over our guest, because I'm a huge space nerd because of the connection of my family to the space program in the 60s and 70s, and also early exposure to Bob Heinlein and when he thought we'd have space travel beyond the moon by 1980. Alas, didn't occur. But Kim Steadman is a space operations engineer. I'm going to let her list the missions that she's worked on and supported, but it's the who's who of exploring our nearby planets in our solar system. So without further ado.
Okay, this is my first time I've actually given just a speech instead of just showed slides and said, let me show you the rover. So I'm following an artist and a writer, and I'm petrified. So if I shake or stumble and can't find my words, it's because I'm an engineer. But so I do have a couple things to say about my fellow guests of honor. Science fiction is the gateway drug to what I do. It inspires so many of us, so without that, you don't have me. And the artist, same thing, like you said. That inspiration, the art that draws us in, that makes us wonder what's really out there. Without you, you don't have me. And so thank you. And of course, without you, none of us would be here. So anyway, so I'll start out with, I'm short like you, so I'm just going to hold the microphone. Explore strange new worlds. I mean, the first time I heard those words was a long time ago, but not in a galaxy far, far away. So I grew up watching Star Trek, and that inspired me, and I also grew up reading science fiction and always into the art. But so I feel like my career has been exploring new worlds, and a huge honor that I've gotten to do this, and I still can't believe it's reality. It's just weird. But when I first got to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, I worked on a mission that none of you have ever heard of. It was called Champollion the Comet Lander. You didn't hear about it because it got canceled. So I've been there for a year, and I thought, I have moved from Georgia to California, and I'm going to be unemployed. So I looked around at what JPL was doing at the time, and I said, Cassini, the Cassini-Huygens mission to Saturn. It's already launched. They can't cancel it. So I took my happy self over to one of the managers there and said, I would like to work on this mission. What do you have? And they gave me a job. And for the next 15 years, I worked on one of the most amazing missions that we've ever had. And it was truly an honor. And I learned while I was on the mission how to be an engineer that operates a spacecraft. So when I first joined Cassini, we were just passing Jupiter. And we had all this time before we got to Saturn, our goal. And I'm like, oh, we're never going to get there. It's going to be super great. Blah, blah. And the next thing you know, we're there. And we have our Saturn orbit insertion so that we can start touring the planet and learning about the whole Saturnian system. And so you've seen the 6 minutes of terror. This was about 98 minutes of a slow burn watching a Doppler graph. Every so often get a little dot. So, we've started the SOI burn. Okay, let's go have something to eat. And it was a slow burn, but once she actually got into orbit and the images started coming down, we all saw Saturn like we had never seen her before. And it was amazing. And then I would go to meetings and they'd be like, well, here's what we saw today. And I was there when all this history was being made. When we when we flew by Enceladus, and the magnetometer people said there's something interesting about this very small icy moon, and we should change our whole trajectory so that we can see this moon with the sun behind it and see what's going on at the South Pole. And there were geysers just like you see in Yellowstone. We got to Titan, the moon that is the most Earth-like body in our solar system. And when Voyager had gone by, Voyager saw an orange blob. When we went by, the first thing we saw was an orange blob. And then we used different filters on our cameras, and then we could see the surface. We could see mountains that got Tolkien names from Lord of the Rings. We saw dunes all over the middle part. We saw lakes of methane at the North Pole, and it was just an amazing mission that went on for many, many years. And at the end, because there's so many places in that system that there could be life. Not saying there is, but there could be. We didn't want to accidentally crash our spacecraft into one of the moons. So she actually did what they called, what's it called? Proximal orbits. I'm not sure why they called them that, but the spacecraft actually went between the rings and the planet. And at the end, we did what they called the grand finale, and she plunged into Saturn to give us that last little bit of science from actually inside Saturn herself. And then we had to say goodbye to her. Then I moved on to I actually worked both at the same time, but I worked on the Mars exploration rovers. Spirit and Opportunity. So these are the little solar-powered rovers. I got a hand clap here, and if I don't cry, it's a miracle, because Opportunity is my girl. So Spirit and Opportunity only was supposed to last 90 days because they did all this math, and they said after 90 days, the solar panels will have so much dust on them that we won't get enough power, sunlight and power to keep operating them. Well, we didn't know that there was these little dust devils that skipped along Mars. That's one of the things we found out. And they would hit one of our rovers, and they'd clean it off. And the images were spectacular. Because I would go into work one day, and it'd be like, okay, Oppie just has no power. We have 300 watt hours. We can't really hardly do anything. We can only be awake for an hour. And the next day you come in, and she tells you that she's getting 900 watt hours. And you're like, okay, and then we take the images, and we see that the day before, solar panels completely covered in dust, and now it looks like somebody spent all night cleaning them, just so that we could start doing science again. And so we had a little model of Oppie, and they had a little toy ninja. So when she got too dusty, we would put her ninja on top and say, please clean us off. And so for 15 years, she explored, and it took, she got stuck, she got unstuck, the instruments broke, they stopped working, the arm could no longer be stowed, and so we drove around with the arm hanging out like this in what we called the Fisher stove position. It was like she's fishing. And so after 15 years, suddenly what scientists of all the orbiters hoped for happened was a massive, colossal dust storm. And when you're a solar-powered rover, and you get all this dust in the air, it's pitch black dark. And that was it. And the storm lasted for months, and I can't even say what their last words were, but you all know them. So after that, I went over to the newer and shinier rover, Curiosity. And Curiosity, so our little Mars exploration rovers were little guys, 100 kilograms, and Curiosity rover was the size of my car, a Mini Cooper. And she, instead of solar panels, she has an RTG, so she's got her power, and she can go on. She's been there for 12 years. And she's in Geld Crater, and she's climbing Mount Sharp. And why would you send a rover to climb a mountain? Because there's a lot of layers. There's layers, and geologists love layers. And so they looked at all these layers from the orbital imagery and said, we must go there. And so she's still spunking around there. I'm actually talking about her tomorrow. So, and that brings us to Perseverance. Another one that's near and dear to my heart. I started working on Perseverance around the time of Critical Design Review. So Critical Design Review is a gate that you have to cross so that you can actually go build your hardware and hopefully get to the launch pad. And that was a lot of work. I think I worked 7 days a week for 3 or 4 years. And as we got closer and closer to launch, we were all very excited. We were going to get to go to Florida and have this big team meeting and watch this launch. It's going to be so spectacular. You work all these hours so you can go watch the launch. And then a global pandemic happened. And about a month before the global pandemic, they announced the name of the rover. So they named the rovers by kids write essays and said this is what the name should be. And a young gentleman won that, and so they announced to us the name of the rover is going to be Perseverance. And I said, what? I cannot even spell that. How am I going to go and do outreach talks about perseverance? And then the pandemic hit, and then we knew this was the name. There's a reason for this. And so when the rovers first landed, we launched and landed on Mars during the pandemic. And so when we went to work, when we were landing, we all had to have the mask. We had a double mask, private double mask. They had all these sticks to tell you have to be 6 feet apart, you have to do this, you have to do that. But but we had landed. Well, we didn't know we'd landed yet, but when we landed, we were just really excited to actually start to do the work. But all the other Mars rover missions had done this Mars time, and you do it as a team. It's a real big team building activity. So when you get off work at 10 a.m., then you go out with the team, and you have this breakfast, and you have all this. So we weren't allowed to interact at all. So you were on this weird Mars schedule because the Martian day is 40 minutes longer than Earth day. And so during Mars time, you want to be able to have as many ground-in-the-loop command cycles as you can. So you work the Martian night. And so one day you go and work 6 p.m. Next day, 7, 10:30, 8. Next thing you know, you're going to work at 2 a.m. And throughout this process, it lasts about 90 days. You don't know what day it is. You don't know what time it is. You have no, but you do know what sol it is. You know the sol number and what the rover did yesterday and what she's going to do today. And so Perseverance, the first thing she did was unpack because she had had a long trip, and she dropped off the Ingenuity helicopter. The first time, well, they say powered flight, but I think the Sky Crane was powered flight. But so she dropped off Ingenuity, and we all watched her fly. And Perseverance is still going, exploring Jezero Crater, and I did a talk about that yesterday. And thank you everyone who came. And along the way, of course, there were anomalies, there were challenges, there were pandemics. Cassini had problems with her reaction mode before she even got to Saturn. We lost part of the equipment on Cassini that allows us to talk to Earth, but we did have a backup, which wasn't as good, but we used it. All the rovers have at one point somehow, except Perseverance, never mind. They've all gotten stuck somewhere, and we've had to unstuck them. We've had a drill fail that we had to figure out. We're here to drill, we're here to collect these samples, feed them into these instruments. We have to figure out a way to do that. We had to figure out how to do that. And what I learned was that being on a team that is asked to solve these problems is the best way to do my job. You have to have a diverse team with different backgrounds and different histories so that you can come up with the best solution. And if you do not have that, do not ever get to the best solution. And so I want to thank all my panelists here, and I want to especially thank y'all for inviting me because I've never been a guest of anything. I've done talks at DragonCon for 15 years, but I just go and I do my talks, and Regina takes very good care of me. And yes, just thank you for having me, and thank you for listening to my stories. And I have a lot of them, so if you see me, just ask me. And if you want me to talk about opportunity more, I will do it, but not in front of this many people. And I still have not been able to watch the biography or the documentary that they did. Everyone's like, did you see it? Did you see it? I'm like, no. It's still too new. Too soon. Unfortunately. But anyway, thank you. And I'm doing a talk today at 1, and I'm talking sometime tomorrow. But thanks for having me, everybody.
We have the visionary, and we have the woman who makes it real. So we can
Another note that I learned from reading this pamphlet, we should all read it more frequently, there's a lot of good stuff in there, is that one thing I can claim to have in common with Kim is we both watched the original 1977 showing of Star Wars before it was A New Hope. And there's It's my pleasure to introduce our special guest of honor, Ben Yalow. Ben is been labeled a SMOP, which is Secret Master of Fandom, and what does that mean? So I was, trying to understand how to introduce how important it is to have a person like Ben contributing and working to fandom and for naming conventions in particular. But they work behind the scenes to make it all possible. Things like negotiating on behalf of a con to get the best affordable rate for a really big expensive hotel without which there would be no con, and doing so while he wasn't even a member of the con committee. And originally a New Yorker, I spent some time in New York myself, a little further south in Midtown, and he has since migrated to the great state of Texas. So without further ado, Ben, over to you, sir.
We talk about exploring new worlds. And we do that within a community where we are constantly reinventing ourselves. We constantly are coming out with new conventions. We are constantly coming out with new, brilliant works in our literary field. And that is absolutely marvelous. I continue to look forward to reading books by authors that I've never read before. I look forward to coming to conventions I've never been to before. This is all wonderful. But there is another aspect that I'd like to mention. As Isaac Newton said, I can see further because I stand on the shoulders of giants. We are a literary field, and we are a convention field, and they all have history. We are about to hit the 100th anniversary of the first science fiction magazine. Amazing Stories came out in 1926. So next year will be the anniversary of the first science fiction magazine. And Amazing Stories is still publishing right now. It's died several times in the past. But it's been revived, and it's back again, and I know they are planning on celebrating being around for 100 years. We also have another anniversary, the 90th anniversary, because the very first convention was in Philadelphia in 1936. So we are looking at 90 years of conventions. Unfortunately, 3 years ago we lost Bob Madel, who was the last person alive who had been to that Philadelphia convention in 1936. He was 102 when he died. It wasn't like he was a kid in 1936. He wasn't a kid when he died. But fandom has a continuity. Bob Madel was a friend of mine. He was a friend of many of the people in this room. Bob Madel was a dealer. He sold me the copies of Unknown that I got to read. And several years ago at this convention, I was on a panel talking about that magazine, Unknown. So the continuity is there. Our history is there. Our history is precious. We may have lost Bob Madel, but we still have people around who know our history. The Hugo Gernsback, who started Amazing Stories in 1926, is long since dead. But we have those issues, and we have the magazines and books that describe our history, that are our literary history. And we can watch the vocabulary that every writer that is writing now is writing in that vocabulary. If you look at a magazine story from the 20s or 30s, if they've got a spaceship, they have to spend 6 pages explaining how the rocket ship works. Or 10 pages explaining what this hyperspace thing that they use to get from place to place is. We don't do that anymore. And the reason we don't do that anymore is because those people spend their time adding to our vocabulary. Our history is precious. We should not abandon our history. We should remember it. This doesn't mean that everything in our history is perfect. Boy, definitely not. There are unfortunate incidents going back many, many decades. There are fan feuds that lasted for more decades than people around would believe. But we still are a community as fans, and we are still a community of people who consume the products of our field. We revel in what the creators have brought us, and we revel in the camaraderie that is fandom. We should continue to do so, and thank you all for having me here to talk about that. So thank you all. I feel incredibly welcome and incredibly honored to be here. Thank you.
So we all stand on the shoulders of giants. That is so true. And that is Ben. Ben is the historian of all fandom at this point. He is the reason that so many of us are here. He is the reason, he and people like him are the reason that we are all here this weekend. Without fandom, we would not have as many storytellers. We would not have as many visionaries, as many engineers, as many scientists. We talked to Chaz, perfect comparison around living life, being happy, doing what we love. For con runners, that is, it is another full-time job. Our families tolerate us at different times. But we cannot thank you enough, because without you, we would not exist. So thank you. And so I wanted to say just a few words about our Master of Ceremonies. This is one of the hardest working men at this convention. It is a difficult position to master, as a few people in this room know. And Mike has definitely done it this weekend. Again, a storyteller. He has done amazing things in the real world, helps us envision the future. He is part of our staff. He has gone from being someone who came as an author, as a guest, to part of the LibertyCon family. So we cannot thank you enough for everything you've done for us, not only this weekend, but every year. Thank you, Mike. So thank you. I hope you had a wonderful meal and continue all of the fun things there are to do at LibertyCon today. So we are done. Thank you very much.